Hello everyone and welcome to this new Substance live stream. I am Vincent Go and I will be your host tonight with a special guest, Pierre Fleau. Hey Pierre, how's it going?
Hi Vincent, very happy to be here today.
Cool, me too. Pierre is a senior material artist at Rockstar right now, and he has a long career of artist, environment artist, material artist in different companies and in the video game industry. So tonight we are with Pierre to talk about his latest collaboration with us with Substance Source, and exactly he made a signature release around the industrial revolution theme. So before to start and get into the details and the presentation within Substance Designer, maybe Pierre, you can share your screen and we are going to get around some of the stuff you have made. I have to say, before you start, I want to say that in the chat you have Marine and Casimir who are going to answer all your questions. So don't hesitate to ask them whatever you want. And Pierre, you have a lot of fans. I see that Vincent Desrosiers is here, Dimitri, Jimmy Malachier, lots of people who say
Salut à tous.
Okay, so I let you share your screen and do a bit of your presentation.
Yeah. So just for introduction, I started my career 17 years ago as a QA tester. I didn't start it as a graphic artist at all. I was studying electricity and I left the school to start as a QA tester. And I learned production and how it was working in the video game industry. And after that, I switched to an environment artist position. So when I was QA tester, I spent some time like learning 3D, learning 3ds Max, Photoshop. And so it was a great experience to that helps me as my first job at Étrange Libellule in France. And I spent 5 years there, and it was like a very good experience for me because I encountered a lot of great artists and they helped me learn a lot about modeling and texturing. So that was those first 8 years of my career was like the foundation of what made my path easier in the future. And after that, I joined Ubisoft and became level artist. So I learned more about how open world was working and world building. So it was going bigger and bigger in terms of mandates. And after that, I had the opportunity to focus more on texture because in 2014, I discovered Substance Designer, and it was maybe the version 4, I think, at the time. And there is no documentation, so it was really, really hard to learn the software at this time. But after some years, it was becoming more and more easy, and I was kind of addicted to it, so I continued. And on Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I had the opportunity to become full-time texture artist and technical artist specializing in texture work. So on this project, I helped integrating Substance fully inside of the engine. So, and with the help of other artists, we created a full workflow and made Assassin's Creed Odyssey a nearly full Substance game. So it was really interesting and a really great experience. And I continue a little and helped a little Immortal Phoenix Rising too. And I did a conference with Vincent Desrosiers at GDC 2 years ago, if someone wants to have more information about the work we did at the time.
Yeah, I remember that. I was there actually, and it was what was crazy that and what we like in this kind of presentation is that you guys have been using Substance Designer and Substance Painter in a super innovative pipeline where actually the blending was the material was made within Substance Designer, but the blending was mostly made within Substance Painter. And you were saying that you were almost not painting within Substance Painter, so it was kind of funny. And
Yeah.
what led you, because as you said, you made like a lot of jobs
Mm.
within the game industry to finally stick to material artists. So I completely agree with this decision. But what led you to this? Why did you choose to go with?
I think it's just for the time being, I like this job. It's just I did lots of different jobs and I learned a lot from every job I did. Like tester, I learned a lot about how to organize a production and how to debug a game. And I think modeling and level art was very interesting too, but I was missing something. Every time when I was at Étrange Libellule, I saw so many artists that was so great at texturing, and I was thinking one day I need to learn to do that too. So I took the time, and after 6 to 7 years, it became much more efficient, especially using Substance, because Substance gave you like a logic way of working because it's half tech and half art. So you can really understand the tech behind materials. So I think it's a very big point. Using Substance, you will learn and understand the full process much more easier.
Yeah, I have to agree, of course, especially with the PBR workflow that came like maybe 5 years ago now, a bit more, but there was less try and guess the material. It was really, as you say, something which was more logical, and it really helped the artist. And so, yeah, I let you continue a bit before to.
Yeah, just quickly, and except that professionally in texturing, I did some very interesting work with the team at NVIDIA. So it was mostly Substance beta work and a little designer. So, and of course, I did some old personal work. It's been some time that I didn't create a new one, but it's all on my ArtStation if someone wants to take a look. And now I want to switch to the project for Substance Source.
Yes,
So
that was a super nice project. So yeah, tell us more about this. Generally, how we came when we see an artist for a Substance Source, the signature release, is we go to an artist we love and respect, and we challenge them to come with a theme that could be interesting. It's quite open, but we want something, of course, that has not been done, or the artist has to bring something. So what lets you to choose this industrial revolution theme?
I looked at the other collection that has been made before, and I thought that it could be interesting to do something maybe different. And at the same time, I was still in Canada, and I went to visit the Canadian Railway Museum in Montreal. So it was nearly the same time. So I thought, hey, why not create a collection around this theme? It could be really interesting. And normally we have around 15 materials for a full collection. So I just think about it, look at some reference, and quickly I just decided that I could split it into 3 parts. So at the end, that's what I did. I did a warehouse that we have here, the train that has like the locomotive, and the wagon that has exterior and interior. And when I started this collection, I didn't want to go fully photoreal because using Substance, you can do a lot of sculpting inside of the tool. Even if it's not all, you have some liberty, so you can do whatever style you want. You're not has to stick to photoreal. And so I chose myself to write down some ideas on how I wanted to go with my texture work. Because at first, when you think about steam train, maybe you think about iron and concrete, and maybe it's a little too monochromatic and boring for some people. But I thought I need to keep some simple like guidelines for myself. So I just write down that I wanted to have some contrast in the overall kit, but also in every part, like in terms of color, balance of shape, details, glossiness, or material variety and wearing of the surfaces. that's a kind of those 5 guidelines that I kept with me all of the projects, just to be sure that when I'm creating new texture, I will add something to the collection and not repeating the same kind of work for every texture. I will start by just going through the different materials quickly, just to see what I did during the production. So I started by the warehouse. That was for me the maybe not the most important part of the project, but a good one to start and to kickstart and apply the guideline I created just before. So I searched for a lot of references in Europe, especially France and Belgium. There was a lot of storage interesting that was like abandoned. So that's where I took most of my reference on the internet. And I started this first wall brick because it has nearly all of the guidelines I wanted to test and to put in place. So like you can see, there is already some, I tried to have an interesting noise for the porosity of the brick. I did more color contrast. And at the same time, I created a base scene because I did all of the scene in Blender. So I wanted to have a lighting that was consistent to tweak my material. So I created a calibrated scene for me. And I was adding the material inside of this scene little by little to be sure that I was balanced in terms of luminosity, of color, of every layer that could fit together.
That's super nice. Do you say calibrating the scene? Sorry. Do you have some tips here to build it? Are you using some specific techniques? Or?
Yeah, it's for example, as this collection, I had a lot of really dark material like coal or cast iron. So I put those material at first, like simple values in my scene to be sure that they will appear like really dark. And I set my lighting to be like calibrated for those dark materials. And after that, I was adding to my scene, like you can see on the screen, I have the same lamp that I duplicated on each primitives to be sure that I had the same condition. And after that, I can compare the different primitives together because at that time I didn't start creating the scene. So I was just putting the material together, testing the different values, see if something was too dark or too bright. It's a good way because in Substance you will switch a lot of material and you don't have the opportunity to have those material together.
Yeah, that's a good trick.
Yeah. After that, I started to added some parameters because in production before I didn't do a lot of parameters, but Substance gives you the opportunity to create a lot. So I export the color, the number of planks, the wearing of the painting, we can see here. And because when I started, I created a quick scene with just plain, and I wanted to see the scale of the door, for example, and tweak the number of planks. So that was one of the features that I use a lot during the project to tweak the scale of different elements in walls, in floors, and nearly everything. I also added on most of my materials some switch to be able to switch from this wall with windows and concrete and everything to fully taggable materials. Like we could switch from this one to those version to be able to create 3D assets for the scene. So like those pillars was creating like that. It's just very easy. I just added maybe 2 or 3 3 nodes inside of the graph, and I could have another version of the texture.
Regarding the tiling materials that you show, we have a question about someone who is starting with Substance Designer and is actually curious to get some tips to when you make a tileable material to make the tiling less noticeable. So do you have some? Are you using some tricks to tackle this issue?
Yeah, I think it's nice to combine multiple noise together, like especially the pair line noise. If you multiply it on top of different material, you can break the tiling easily. or just using the transform node. If you have two different kind of noise and you offset another one and you combine them back together, you can break the tiling pretty easily. So it's combining different elements together and hiding some parts sometimes.
Yeah, and also sometimes not making a single element that pops because directly it will be noticeable. And I have another question, because for a while right now it's like almost it has become a tradition to build a scene to present the signature release, and you built one which is excellent. So I was curious to know, do you do it before, after? Does the scene lead you to choose the material, or is it the contrary? You build the scene thinking of the material you have made. How do you proceed?
I didn't decided at the beginning to create the scene. I created maybe two materials at first, the wall brick and the wood tile. And after that, I was thinking that it would be so much easier for me to define the full list of material I wanted to create if I know what I was going to make at the end. So having a context helps always a lot to restrain what you want to create and choose the most efficient material you will want to make. It's like if you have a better context and a better understanding of what you will have at the end, you can split it into different, more precise texture and choose more precisely what you will put inside of your work, basically.
Yeah, I totally agree. And generally, even in production, you rarely start from scratch. You have either a concept, and from this concept, of course, the scene or some elements. So yeah, it really helps and saves some time.
But for me, on this project, because it was more like a special project, not a production project, I took the opportunity to play a lot in Substance, using the height map. That's like this trend tracks. I created it, maybe the third material I made. And I use a custom build of Blender to have parallax mapping. So I used a lot of parallax in my scene. Like that, it was really cool because I had the viewport that was real time and I had the material with all of the volume. It was really fluid and working really well. So I really played a lot with that on different material. And that's the final asset I created for the warehouse. It's mostly cubes and planes.
Yeah, it's nice to see them like this and to see the scene you have built, because you see that finally, if you are well organized and think ahead, with, as you said, like a few elements, you can build a full scene that works. So that's great.
Yeah, and it's really nice because you can always come back and tweak the number of windows or just change the number of bricks, the color, and you just click on export. I was going back to Blender and just clicking on reload, and I had the new update. So
that's
really
nice.
fast. And after that, I started the Locomotive. So the Locomotive, I wanted to have a very big contrast between the Locomotive and the Wagon. So I started at first looking for reference of Canadian and British steam locomotives. And I splitted my documentation between the engine, the locomotive, and I took some time to find some blueprints too, because some parts was not really clear. When you look at a locomotive for the first time, it's a little intimidating. So especially if you want to recreate a complete texture based on that, here are the reference I use for the entire cabin. And so it helps me a lot to spend some time searching more reference and keywords too, because sometimes you don't know this piece. And if you want to find some more reference with keywords, it's much more easier. At first, I created the hatch material because I couldn't create a trend collection without making this one. So this one was really interesting. I made multiple versions. A simple one, it's this one that didn't have any accessories on it to be put on the 3D model. And I had it just for fun. A lot of different lights and different elements on it, just for renders and for texture. And to create different kind of things, like the cable that is running on top of the hatch was really challenging but really interesting to make. And at the same time, I started working on this one because those two materials are linked together. They are using the same cast iron, the same noise. The weldings that I created for this material is the same that we can we have here too. So I spent some time trying different recipes and copy pasting them between the two materials to finally have a full set of material to create nearly the full locomotive with it. And I had some parameters to change the number of all the different elements. At the beginning, I added some paints at the end and didn't keep it, but I was just trying and adding and removing different elements. So those two materials were really interesting to make and really useful at the end. I exported maybe like 3 different variations of it by tweaking the parameters to be able to make the locomotive with it. And after that, I started this one that was the most complicated of the collection because there is a lot of elements that need to be placed at the good position everywhere. So it took me really some time to place the good elements. And I think the most complicated was to separate the different materials because you have different kind of metals, you have different kind of materials. So they all needed to be separated and put at the good place. But we will look in this material later.
And the funny thing on this one is you also linked some elements together. So when you you were quite kind of crazy on this one. So when you move a handle, for example, it will you can see the all the stuff moving around accordingly, the pressure, etc. So that's
I
cool.
remember I nearly had finished this material. It was really late, and I was, but I put so many handles and many things. It could be fun if I could just open the furnace and put the power on the fire. So I just added those different parameters on it. So you can open the furnace and put the fire on and the gauge on top. If you put the pressure really high, the liquid, the red and blue liquid will go up and the needle will follow at the same time. So it was useless, but I find it funny at the moment. So
it is. It's actually, and we are going to see it in action in a moment.
Yeah. So this is the render inside of Blender.
Yeah, and you are using a Blender EV for rendering, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real-time viewport.
That's nice, which is super powerful.
And after that, I just created the wheels because I needed a lot of wheels. So it's nearly the same, but I have opacity on top of it. So that's what's looking. And this one, at first I wanted to use it for the warehouse, but finally I use it only on the floor of the locomotive. And yeah, it was still very interesting to do and a cool material to create. And the coal, because locomotive needed coal to work. So
yeah,
create one too. And here I have the breakdown of the assets of the locomotive.
It looks
and
like a toy.
Yeah.
Build it yourself.
Yeah, I should print it. And after that, I started the Wagon. And on this one, I really wanted something very, very different, but I still kept some elements to fit with the locomotive. Like I have those white line that is going all along and this black paint to connect with the locomotive. So I still try to keep some elements to link the train together and feel that it's not a different train and it's really working together. On this part, I took a lot of reference from the museum directly, and I just replicate them. So basically, those panels, the wood board here, the fence, it's like inspired from my reference directly. and I split those references into exterior and interior. So the exterior is just two material. This one where you can remove the door if you just want to have a fully window tileable, you can remove the text too. The leather roof tarp, just to have a simple leather material but still interesting, and the full rendering of the exterior. And after that, that's the most different part of the project. I wanted really to have the more contrast on this part to feel much more cozy, much more comfortable. So I think wood was the best material for that. So I added kind of Atlas styleable wood panel that made nearly 90% of the interior. And this one was not very complicated to create because I just used the composition of the wall as a draft to create my texture. So I just like model few elements that was going to represent my texture just to find the good scale. And when I had everything, I put this into my texture and created all of the decorating elements on top of that. So it was maybe one of the easiest to figure out what to put inside of this texture.
That's purely impressive. We have some question in the chat for you. So I guess the first one will depend on the materials, but one of the questions was how long does it take to first to texture everything? If you have a rough idea, how long did it take you to do this?
I don't know, because I had a big break in the middle of the project because I moved from Canada to Scotland during the pandemic. So it was
that's always funny.
That's difficult.
Yeah.
But no, I think the texturing of all the scene, I'm not really sure. It took me maybe a month or a month and a half, but I was working on it some evenings, sometimes a little in the weekend. So I didn't kept a real
time track.
Yeah, I didn't track how many times, but it was relatively quick because it was very simple shapes. I used the Parax mapping a lot for the details, so I kept the modeling very, very simple. I didn't want to spend too much time on the modeling as I was more focusing on the texture.
Yeah, I'm still thinking that some people are crying in the chat because if you are able to do this in 1 month during your spare time, meanwhile you are moving from North America to Europe, it's a good pace, definitely. We also have just a fun question you answered me, but to share, which class is it for the Wagon? First class, second class, third class?
Yeah, I was thinking first class maybe.
First class, yeah. I think it looks first class. It's cozy.
Yeah.
And we have another question. Someone was curious about the poly count of your scene. Do you have an idea, a rough idea of how much polygons you are using? You can say no. Okay.
No,
what we'll do at the end, we may open the scene within Blender, so we may have a look.
Maybe we could see that.
Nice. Yeah, you have
I still have one or two material just to finish, and this one, at first I was thinking it will be simple and quick to make, but it was not difficult at all. But I was very happy with the results. It's a kind of generator to create fabric. You have like two types of fibers and maybe 5 to 10 different patterns to use with it. And I used this material to create the floor, the curtains, and the seat. And I quite like the final result. I think it works not bad. And at the end, I added this decorative trim sheet because I thought that the train was missing a smaller detailed scale. So I added this to have a lot of smaller elements to help filling that sense of scale in the scene. So this is the final module of the wagons. The base is from the locomotive, but on top all of the wood walls and the exterior. It's basically what I made, so it's not, there is not a lot of polygon. I think there is more polygons in the seats that's in the full wagon itself.
And do you think a model like this could be used in a game where the person is complementing the question, or what would you change if not, compared to real game asset?
I think if we are making game assets, we will break down those materials much more to add more modeling, to create more volume and depth inside of the model. Because I was only going to make screenshot, I didn't really needed to do that. But because in a game environment, you want to move around, so you need to have more details in terms of modeling. But yeah, if you are going to just make screens or videos, you can choose the angle you want to show. So it's easier to just create the detail at the place you want to put it and not everywhere.
Okay, thanks.
And so that is the full collection finished.
Yeah, full collection available on Substance Source, and I think the material we are going to show is the one which is free on Substance Source. So after watching Pierre overshowing the material, you can go and dive into it and cry a bit because it's beautiful. Okay, so I think you are going to show this, and then after we go to Substance.
I have first this material, and after one I have this one too.
Exact.
So yeah, I will start by the cat panel. The graph seems a little intimidated at first, but
not at all, not at all.
Especially if I do that, in fact.
Yeah, from this position, but actually, because before you are using a technique that I found super interesting, and that you are going to show about the you are creating some highways, we can say, which are super useful actually to organize the graph.
Yeah, I like to work like that because my graph normally are not very tidy, but because of the substance source optimization, I have a lot more like back and forth of different nodes. So if we look like the basic node of the graph, I try to optimize the number of nodes, so that's why I have a lot of back and forth. But like I try to work the height map in the middle of my graph, like that. And I created the smaller elements all around it, and I integrate those elements little by little in the graph. Like, for example, I started to create this material based on a disk. So that's the shape of the engine, basically. And after that, I just added a square and combined both together. So it's very basic. And I blurred them together and use a level just to create a smooth transition. And after that, a bevel to create a big gradient to be able to work the shape. And by using the curve node, I created the volume of the engine just here.
Meanwhile, you are creating the height. Do you check constantly how it looks within the 3D viewport to make sure you have the volume you want? Or?
I do that, but what I do most of the time is I create
just
a normal
node.
node. Yeah, I always do that when I'm working. I put it like maybe 10 in intensity, and I like to keep it just nearby and look at the volume, because sometimes, like here, I'm adding some. I created a noise for the cast iron just here, and sometimes looking at the height is a little difficult because the values are very, very, very small, and it's not always very easy to figure out what you are doing. You can see it in the viewport, but I like to see it in different ways. So like from here, I took the shape of the engine and I created a basic noise. So I just took this noise, used the level here to like clamp the value to have something that is more sharp on the border. And after that, just use the slope blur to make it a little more destroyed.
That's nice. And there is a Dimitri in the chat that says that your graph at works are really more messy. So he's denoting you. Yeah. So you will talk with him later on about that.
Yeah, I know. Because he's looking at my old work right now. So. And so after I took this mask and I just added with a very small value. So when you look at that and that, it's not really easy to see the difference. But if I look in the normal, like it's much more easier to see. After that, I started to create the smaller elements and add them little by little in max Newton. So it's like you use the height to put the different accessories or item inside one of each other. So this one was made like using an hemisphere that I just transformed to make it more oval. And I use the curve node to create this kind of bevel inside of it. And I reused some of my graph, like for the bolts, this one. I created this graph at first. Like very simple. It's a combination of an hemisphere and a polygon. And what I did is that I used the label here to kind of change the volume and clamp it like that. And after that, I combine it with this sphere to create the specific shape you have on bolts. So it's like a little like booleans, in fact, that we use a lot in modeling. And so this part like that, I reused it on all of this graph. The same bolt is reused everywhere. So it was really useful to create this one.
That's nice. Someone is asking in the chat, but I may answer for you. Is how much time can it take for a beginner to learn designer and to be able to create material like this? So if you're a beginner, don't start by doing something like this.
No,
because
no.
You are going to suffer a lot. Don't hesitate to go to Substance Academy and it's like everything, you have to start with little projects, and then by the time it will depend of your involvement with the tools. And but if you do a bit every day or a few times a week, it can go fast.
Yeah, and I think nowadays there are a lot of resources available. A lot on Substance Academy, Substance Source, Substance Share, and a lot of tutorial available everywhere. So yeah, it's much more easier to learn Substance.
Yeah, definitely. There is Pierre Desrosiers, I don't know if you know him, he's asking you, how can you be so awesome? No, we don't have the answer to that. It's like this.
Yeah, to continue, in this project, I use a lot of text node. I didn't use it before. It was maybe one of the first time I used this node in Designer, but very, very useful to add a lot of small details. In fact, it looks a little scary, but in fact, it's just small elements, very simple every time. So like this one, it's a sphere that I modified with a curve to have a more interesting shape. It's this element here. And just here, I just use transform node to place them, because at first I wanted to find a complex generator to put them at the good place dynamically, but it was just not necessary. So I just use transform node and place them everywhere like that. And at the end, use a mirror to have
yeah. What is great once again is because as you say, it's big, but because there is a lot of element, but the fact that you have this path, and that we know that after you have built the shape, you are adding new shape, new elements, and blending them together within this path. It makes it super clear.
And there was many reasons for that, but one of the main reasons is that I wanted to have multiple material. Like this metal is different from this one and from this one. So I needed to be able to isolate afterward those materials to create the final texturing after the height. So that's why I used this way of creating it. So yeah, after that, I'm adding a little more noise to add more volume on this one. And I started to adding bolts around the engine, but I had a little problem when I did that, is that I generated a splatter circular, I think maybe. No, it was a
Shape mapper or splatter circular? No,
splatter circular. Yeah, it's a splatter circular. Just I reuse the splatter circular after, and I transform it to retake it to another part of the game. And so I use a function that I like to use a lot. It's the cropping area, just here.
Yeah.
I know many people don't know about this feature, but now I use it a lot. It's like you can crop beginning from the bottom, the top, right or left. So I just cropped the bolts I didn't want. And after that, I just added new one to finish. So it was a quick and easy way to fix that problem. After that, I added new elements. I think it's still the same kind, basic shape. This one was the same I used for this one, so I just reused it and connected the graph on it. This one is interesting because, yeah, it's this one. To create this shape, so I'm using it here. I started from a gradient circular because I wanted to, when you are using like a histogram scan and you play with the position and you put the contrast to 1, you can like create some triangle shape.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And I combined it using multiply to cut shape. Still a little like Boolean, in fact. I cut it again. And after that, I use a trick I like to use is to use the edge detect with the roundness to be able to round the corner of shapes. So you just take this shape, do an edge detect, playing with the roundness. And after that, you just apply it and multiply on top.
Nice trick, once again.
After that, I just beveled it and I created another triangle to make the little inset, the little bevel inside here to have this difference of depth. Again here. Yeah, after I just integrate it with a lot of different elements. This is a principal handle. This one I started from a gradient linear and I give the shape using the curve node because it's I think the most easy way if you want to create some slope. It's just gradient and curve. I tweaked the shape with the trapezoid transform and I did some Boolean operation on it based on 2 cubes that I beveled just to subtract the shape. add it again to create this smaller attach. After
Someone
that,
is oh, sorry.
okay.
Go ahead.
No, you can ask. It's fine.
Yeah. Someone is asking actually, how do you choose with which shape to start and how to blend them together? Do you start from bottom to top, or bigger to smaller, or a bit of both?
Normally, I just look at what I want to create and how to break it down in in bigger shapes, and
Okay.
after just refine it and add some new elements on top of it.
Okay.
Like this one, I didn't know how to try it, so I say it seems like more rectangle, so I will start from a square, or it's just sometimes maybe the next time I'm doing it, I will do it another way. I don't like to keep some recipe. I try to always start from scratch every time, and many times I find some new way of creating things. So it's nice like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Here I just use the same tricks as before to round the corner. And finally, I tweak it. I added some small volume on top of it. I placed it in the middle here. It was like setting a pivot point to it. And I added a non-square transform. So this is the node I'm using to do the rotation. So I exposed the rotation like that by going inside and tweaking it. And so I was able to do some rotation by exposing these values and linking the same value to the door afterwards.
So I see some feedback in the chat saying that, okay, I cannot imagine this being used in real life production. That's one of the, let's say, the goal of signature drops is doing some stuff that you wouldn't do in real life because of time, because of sometimes performance. Of course, it's Adam who say modeling would have been easier. For sure, for some part it would have been easier,
maybe,
but the substance source signature release are like challenges for material artists. So that's why some of them are production ready. Some material are like this one, like showcase of like pushing the boundaries of what is possible within Substance Designer.
And sometimes it's just interesting to try to create it in Designer because you will find some tricks that you didn't thought you will find. So of course, I will not do that in production for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure it will pass.
Yeah. But to make the material or some operation to create the small, maybe if you want to create some bolts or some small elements you want to convert to decal, could be like really good. To maybe sometimes it's more quicker to create the smaller elements, just a small height map and reuse it in ZBrush or in a small texture to add details on top of different models. It's a mix of both finally.
Yeah, someone is saying that it looks quite fast to compute such a complex graph. So, do you have a good GPU at home, or?
I have the first version of the Titan X.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, but I think it takes something like 350 milliseconds. It's quite quick to compute, in fact.
Yeah.
I was trying
good
to
Steam engine.
Yeah, if I change.
Yeah, this is the funny part. So let's look at that. As you say, one of the beauty of Substance Designer, as most of you know, is that you can link parameters together. So you see that with one parameter, Pierre can open the door and change switch the fire.
If I look at this one, I can adjust the level of liquid. So if I put it to 0, I have nothing here, and I put to 0.
The needle is adapting.
To 50, it will be a 50 and half here.
That's super cool.
So it's it's not really useful, but it could be in sometimes when you want to create something like really specific or a kind of generator. Maybe you will need this kind of feature a lot. So I just took this opportunity to play a little with it.
That's awesome.
This is reusing a little the same. I use the bolt and a sphere with a curve node on it. And this is the glass I put on top of this one. So I just started with a simple cube, blurred it, added some directional blur to make it like a kind of direction. And after I just copy it different times. And to control the liquid, it's made using gradients and histogram scan. So it's a little the same. You can just use full contrast, and after that you can just control how much you want. After I wanted to create this part, so I needed at first to create a hole here before adding the doors. So I reused the shape of the engine directly and scale it a little to make it the shape I needed. And added a non-uniform blur to create some volume, because you can use the bevel or the non-uniform blur. The non-uniform blur is very nice because you have a very smooth shape. And after that, if you play with the curve, you can really create some interesting volume. And yeah, the hole is here. So I reused this shape, create this volume, tweak it a little. And after that, I subtracted this shape from the engine directly. After that, I added the door. For the door, I did something a little different. I tweaked the size of the door using detect just to cut the shape a little smaller. And I used a tile sampler because I wanted to generate hole inside of this shape. But if I use this directly, it will be too big. That's why I use this edge detect to reduce the size of this one and be able to generate the hole at the good position. After that, it's just a mask map. It's a map to constrain the generation of the elements you want to spawn inside of the tile sampler. So after that, I just mirror it and use the curve node. And I placed it to have the pivot point just here using the transform node. And after that, apply the same recipe I created for the cast iron. So I just linked to the same noise and applied it in the same way. So it was very quick to do. And reuse the non-square transform with the rotation to make it move. So that started the windows on top. This one was really simple and quick to create. It's a combination of sphere and cubes, a little the same. For the hinge here, just use the non-uniform blur to extrude the shape and added this little shape here by using a tile generator. And after it's just using transform to make it fit at the good position. And yeah, I think during this production, I rediscovered the tile generator because in production, you tend to use a lot the tile sampler.
Yeah.
And but the tile generator has some really good feature, and is very quick to compute.
Yeah, and we
So,
remade it recently as well. So
yeah, that was the feature that was added was something I was looking for a long time, to be able to automatically scale at the same size different element inside of it.
so someone is asking once again about if this kind of crazy huge node is effective or efficient in production. Once again, as we say, it's more a challenge. But I was talking once with Jonathan, and he was saying that if he had the choice, the fact knows that he's really used to Substance Designer. He said it's really easier to iterate on the graph rather than on a mesh. So
Yeah.
so if you are used to it, I don't know what's your point on it, but I kind of agree. For iteration,
if you are used to it, it really takes not a lot of time. Like if I want to create this small graph, maybe it will take just 5 minutes to create, even less than that. So if you look at that, maybe it doesn't take that much time to create those elements. And if you are reusing a lot of different, it will not be that long finally. And if you create some specific asset, I think especially for decal, if you want to add some really small elements, you put in like in a trim sheet or texture atlas with a lot of small elements, maybe using parallax in a game engine. I think Substance is really great to do that, and I did it in production too before. So I think we need to think carefully of what the final asset needs to be used for in a game. If it's just to decorate some smaller parts and you don't need to have too much modeling, just go for it with a designer, and some shape composition like that could work great too.
Yeah, luckily, if the future is bright, we have showcased an R&D project with procedural modeling within Substance Designer, so we can imagine a bright future as well, mixing both.
Yeah, and I used this technique too a lot to create some alpha files for ZBrush. Sometimes you just want to create a height map and you want to use it in a modeling package. So I use it very often to do that. This after I separated all the gold elements together. So they are just here. Seems a lot of nodes, but in fact, here is just this shape. And I'm using a shape extrude, like to make it 3D. And I just took the profile of it to be able to create this shape. And I just duplicate to get the transform together. So this one was not really long to make. And after that, I created a lot of different small pieces that are just basically a gradient that I add together. And I combine everything like that. So yeah, it's basically almost always some small operation based on primitives and just combining them each other. And when I finished the whole volumes like that, the second step I'm doing is to create some kind of ID mask. So I'm going at every step here, and I create a node, and node between those elements. Yeah.
Yeah, for the someone is asking for the bent pipes that you did. If you were using a warp node or another technique.
I'm using the swirl.
Swirl? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Also.
I didn't know this one too before a lot, so I discovered it. I was thinking of a way to do that, and I didn't find the way to do it properly. And I just thought that there was a node inside of Substance to do this kind of operation, and I found it. So yeah, it was quite useful. Another trick that I found very interesting is what's happening here. I wanted to create the pipe here with this shape. So I just use square to create this specific shape. And when using the mirror, you can offset your mirror like in y-axis. And if you do that multiple times, you can really offset it out of this, out of the square. That's how I created this shape.
That's a cool technique.
Save me some time here. So yeah, after finishing the height, it looks like that, and placed all the elements at a good depth. And I started just created some nodes to subtract the addition of detail. So it's ready to subtract this node and isolate the shape like that to be able to have a correct mask to isolate every piece that is going to clip in each other. So we want to isolate those details, like this one is for the wood. I have this one for the frame. And every piece will have his own mask. I like to work like that because after that, when I have all of those masks, I can create my metalness really quickly just by adding those masks together. Like if I just took the mask of the metal part, I just add them together like that. It's basically what I did here. So you just add them together and you have your final metalness. And for the color, what I like to do is I start from the height map and I generate a normal map, AO, curvature, here, different kind of curvature. It's like I generate a small mask generator just for me here. Even some light nodes sometimes can be really interesting. I use this one for dust. And when I have all of this mask created, I start to combine uniform color. So here I took a 50 sRGB color for the castle run. And I'm just adding some color variation inside of it using the mask I just created before. This one especially is interesting because is it this one? No, it's not this one. This one is the curvature. So yeah. And after that, I just add all of the different elements. So like the wood, I created a small part of the graph here just to create the wood. So for the wood, I created this. That is the combination of noise I like to use when I want to create wood fibers. It's mostly directional noise. And I use like histogram scan or histogram select to isolate some really small noise, interesting. And I like to use the gradient dynamic with some really blurred directional noise, like anisotropic noise that is blurred. And I use this gradient dynamic to create those like kind of wood fibers. And I, after that, use a gradient map to like filter the wood fibers, because if I just keep that like that, I will have a lot of noise inside of my wood. So I like to do it like that. I just take the gradient map and just remove some noise. And that made basically this one plus this one combined together, create the whole wood. I just use that here. and combine some solid color with my wood fiber. After that, I created a specific part for the metal here. So I just have my PBR value on top, and I use my mask just previously made to blend them together at the good place. And after that, I just added a small dust map on top of it. This one, using this mask of dirt. And I removed this same mask in the metalness to be sure that those part was not going to be metallic because it's just dust or dirt. This color is just for the emissive because I created a small part here for the emissive. So it's just, I use this sphere to isolate the detail I wanted for the fire. And after that, blend the color on top. So that's really basic too, but it's really efficient to create that kind of effect.
That's super great. Honestly, people in the chat are super impressed by this material. This is kind of crazy. As you say, it's complex, yet at the same time, it's super organized. So everything is super clear.
Yeah, it's complex if you look at it like that, but if you look at every square like that, the operations are all very simple, in fact.
Yeah. Yeah, when people was asking if you, we got the answer. I guess that you prefer to have everything into a single graph rather than having subgraphs.
Yeah, most of the time I don't create too much subgraph because I like to be able to link every resource from everywhere. Like
Okay.
if I have some, maybe, I don't know, some specific noise I want to reuse and I put it into some subgraph, maybe I forgot it's in this subgraph. So I just used to do like that. But most of the time I don't create so big graph like that. So maybe for this one, it could be interesting to create some recipe in subgraph. It could be much more efficient, I think. So yeah, it really depends on the project you are working on.
Yeah. So we are 1 hour, more than 1 hour right now. So maybe we can go to the second, to the wood. Or...
This one is basically what everything I did on it. The second one is a little easier. So it's basically the same. You still have the height that is just here and all of the small elements that I created around. So I think what is really important to look at this material is if you want to achieve a good wood material, you need to have a kind of logic inside of the wood fiber. Like I have horizontal elements, vertical elements, and some that are more organic, like this shape. So I started by creating the horizontal shape. Everything is based on the gradient linear. And I kind of isolated some planks and using different nodes like the curve node, you can create the profile. Like this part is this one. You can just create based on that. This one. And I just blended all of the horizontal parts together. I used like a square shape rotated at 45 degrees to cut the angle to be able to put the piece together. It's like assembling a real furniture, but in a substance, in fact. And I just arranged them like that. I did the same for the vertical one. And why it was interesting is because I created my wood fiber at first, the same I did just before on the on the cal panel. It looks very similar. So, and I rotated it to be able to have 3 versions. So I have a horizontal version, vertical version, and another one. I'm using the directional warp to like transform or warp the shape on top of the volume. So I keep this version only for this part. And I think those 2 lines here that are using it too. So I just combine everything together and I have this kind of layer. In the height map, I'm only using this one because I reduced the amount of noise to be sure that I was not putting too much noise inside of the surface. That's the trap when you are creating wood. Sometimes you just go too fast and you add a lot of noise and your surface become really, really noisy, and you definitely don't want to have that. So, but I still kept it like that for the final texturing, for color and for roughness. So I have like basically 3 versions, one for the height and those 2 for the color. After that, I just combine them together, creating the masks. Like every time I do it, I create a lot of normal. Sometimes I even invert the height map and use the ambient occlusion node. Like that, you can create a kind of thickness map or SSS map. And it's really, really useful if you want to create some edging effect like that. And after that, I just combine the different elements together. So like I have 2 colors for my wood, and then just adding some different layers to create some edging effect or different color for the part that are a little broken. At the end, I did a little curvature on top, but not too strong, just to make the map globally a little more sharp. I prefer doing that. I often don't use a lot the sharpen node because it could create some artifacts. So if you put it like very strongly, it will become very ugly in your final map. So I tend to use it very lightly and add some curvature sometimes, but not too strong, just 0.1, it's already nice. So yeah, I think what we need to remember is really I think the wood fiber and the direction are the thing that helps the most in this kind of material, but
yeah, it really gives the volume and the believability of the wood planks that are used in the structure.
yeah, for the rest, it's just like the same kind of modeling I did before, just using bevel and adding some simple primitive like a sphere with curve on it. It's not very complicated shapes, but it's still useful. I added those kind of parameters, so if you click, you can just remove everything and keep a full tileable version. I use this on the floor and on the ceiling. And you can change the amount of planks if you want to have less planks.
That's super great. Just so you know, we have added a small survey in the chat to see what you guys are thinking about the live streams in general, not specifically this one, but in general, what we can do better, what you want us to continue doing. So please just take a moment to answer the survey. It will really help us and improve the quality of the live streams. And yeah, the result is quite stunning. And as you say, the fact of really modifying the fiber direction depending of the plank you are actually doing it's super great.
It's just to be sure that all the details, you don't have a noise that is going because sometimes if you don't break the noise, you will break the illusion that you have multiple planes put together. So
yeah.
After it's just a combination of different kind of elements. Like this one was interesting too to create. At first, I didn't know how I would create that, but at the end, I just created a simple gradient, the tile generator with the non-uniform blur, and I just used the skew to make it like that and subtract the shape. So it was finally not that complicated. So use this cell node to like remove some kind of volume inside of it. So it's nice because at first I always create my height. I do a first version of my color and my roughness, and after I come back to my smaller details and I add some elements and some destruction inside of it, and it all updates every time. So it's very good for iteration.
Yeah, that's impressive. It's let's say simpler than the previous one. Well, there is it's the same kind of elements. I would say it's good, but still, it's the fact that you organize, and we can also see that you are using a lot of trim sheet, which is a game technique that is heavily used to save resources. So this kind of material, for example, would be production ready. I would say we can definitely use something.
Yeah. I think
like this in
maybe in production I will remove this detail and this
put
one.
it in modeling.
Yeah, to be able to have the full tiling along.
Okay.
Yeah, just to be more efficient, like that you can reuse this part more easily. But this angle could be interesting too, to have this detail. That's why I added this option to be able to remove this part and use this as one piece inside of the train. But yeah, this one is much more game ready, I want to say. It's more the type of graph I would create in a game production. It's more simple, more quick, and easy to iterate on it. Because if you do that in modeling, and you spend a lot of time to do that, and after you have some retake, you have some feedback from someone, and you need to change the different elements.
It never happens.
You just spend a lot of time to do that. But maybe here we just come back and just take some element here, move them a little, and it's done. So
that's super nice.
That's what I like Substance.
Yeah. So maybe before to go to the final question, guys, if you have some question, it's the right time to ask it. Meanwhile, we are going to watch a bit how it looks within Blender, directly in the viewport with Eevee, which is yeah. It's of course, I guess most of guys know Blender and Eevee real-time render, which is really superb. So the fact to see that in real time, it really shows that that's crazy, the quality you can get.
It's really cool to create your asset in this kind of environment. It's like you are modeling and working in the scene at the same time. And yeah, you can still see that there is not a lot of modeling inside of the scene.
Yeah, the with and without texture is impressive. It really shows how what the texture bring to the project. Oh, you have the light. Yeah, impressive, really impressive.
So you see, you have more polygon in the seed that in a hole.
Okay, so That was great. I think we are reaching the end of this live stream. I'm just checking in the chat if we have some question. Someone is asking about yeah, the 30 assets from Substance Source that come with Source. If they are pre-picked monthly, no, you have 30 credits each month with the subscription, and you choose whatever you would like to use. Just continuing to look. So for us aspirant environment artists in the actual state of the industry, do you find more valuable to focus on modeling sculpting skills or materials for an environment artist?
I think it's great to have an understanding of everything, because modeling and texturing are really linked together. When you are creating your model, you really want to think about how you want to arrange your texture sheet. And the opposite is true too. You need to like really measure and see the size of your elements and how to break it down, especially if you work in a modular environment way, if you want to really be optimized. And so I think it's good to understand and practice both.
Yeah. I would add that now there is like dedicated material artist as well. So if you are an environment artist, modeling will be mandatory anyhow. And it's good to know how material works. But once again, it really depends also of the organization. So
Yep.
you may be in charge of your doing the texturing, and maybe it will be a dedicated person.
And sometimes a material artist will have to do some modeling too. It's really depend on the task.
Exactly. Okay, so someone is curious to know about parallax occlusion you mentioned earlier. What is it actually? Someone is asking what is parallax occlusion.
It's like a fake effect to duplicate the texture on top of each other. It's like a lot of layers to fake the depth inside of the floor. For example here, it's like if I look here, it seems that I have some volume, but in fact, it's just a plane. So exactly. It's using the height map to define the height of different elements, and after that, you will have this kind of like it's a little like tessellation, but it's done in the shader only.
Yeah, that's exactly that. If you go to a normal map, it will just modify the lighting. So if you look under certain angles, you will see the trick. Meanwhile, parallax occlusion, as Pierre showed, you cannot see unless you get really at the horizontal of the material. But if not, it's really creating. It's a bit more expensive, of course, but now with
if you look at that and if you go here, you will lose the volume.
Here you see that everything is disappearing. It's like a bit looking into an aquarium, where the surface would be the plane.
But it's working well if you have a closed environment and you don't have borders.
So I don't see any more questions. So I think I had a lot of reaction. I had Jimmy who was asking if this train was going to Hogwarts. So it could be, or North Pole as well. It would work well. I think it's in the
story. It could, yeah.
Oh, someone is asking, how did you create the curtains inside the train? So I think you made a trim sheet. If you can, yeah, Ludwig, you can look at the beginning of the here. It's part of a material. Actually, this one is part of a material, right? Or is it
I have two materials. Yeah, it's model, and I am using two materials for this one. I have not this one. Yeah.
So
it's right now, but I have this fabric and the trim sheet. I don't have it here, but it's I have it at the beginning of the presentation. We have metal in it and those small details inside of it. It's just a combination of both.
And there is a question that I forgot that I missed also is how do you keep your height range in line? I don't see any height blend in your graph, but actually there is a lot, no? Of
Yeah.
height blend.
Yeah.
But you are using blend node directly, no? Or...
Yeah. Sorry, blend node in max lighten every time. And I'm just using level or histogram range to place the different element at the good depth.
Perfect. And someone asked also how long did it take, but you said it at the beginning. It was 1 month during your spare time and during intercontinental moving. So quite impressive. Okay, I think we made the most of it. We made the most of it. Pierre, thanks a lot. That was amazing. Especially the first one is like mind-blowing with all the fact that you linked everything together and you put all these details. So thanks again. I don't know if you have a special. There was a lot of people of friends of you in the chat as well, so I'm inviting you to have a look after. I think it's a good idea that you didn't have it on the side because you would have been a bit you would have lost a bit of your concentration, I guess. For people watching, thanks again for being there. Once again, look at the survey so we can improve ourselves, and we see each other in the next chat. Actually, in the next live stream. Sorry, we have one actually who is a bit later. It has started about footwear. If you go on LinkedIn, so if you're in the footwear design industry, there is a cool one right now. Just go on our LinkedIn page. Thanks again, and have a good.
Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, thanks Pierre, and thanks everyone, and see you in the next live stream. Bye-bye.
Bye.